My name is Josh Frost. I'm the president of LaborFest Hawaii. I wanted to thank everyone for coming out. It's a big room, but we filled it, and so I thank you all for helping us with that. Before we start and we get to the program, the reasons that you guys are here, I just wanted to thank a number of people for helping making this event possible and recognize some folks in the room. Our host and co-sponsor, the IBEW 1186. This is their building. Thank you so much for your support and help making this evening possible. IBEW 1260 members. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, 665. UPW, United Public Workers. The Hawaii State AFL-CIO. The Center for Labor Education and Research, specifically Dr. Bill Pewitt, who's here somewhere. Oh, he's hiding in the back. The Hawaii State Teachers Association, Hawaii Federal Amalgamated, 1998. Yeah. International, the ILWU, Local 142. They printed our programs for us this evening, and we appreciate that. The Quon Makarath Fund for Education and Social Justice. They've been a longtime supporter of us, and we appreciate that. Pride at Work Hawaii have provided the drinks and I think some of the food. Thank you very much. Unite Here Local 5, who you'll hear more from this evening, have been supportive. Thank you, guys. Olelo Community Media is recording and will broadcast this event later in the month. And actually, I think in the programs, there are schedules for when this will air. United Public Workers is listed twice, so again. And then I wanted to recognize some elected officials. We have former Governor George Wahei'i in the room. Thank you very much for coming. Senator Donna Mercado Kim is here. Thank you very much. We also have former House Rep Matt Lopresti is here. I think if I'm missing anyone, shout them out. But I think that's it. And hopefully more will show up later. I wanted to also, thank the rest of the board for helping make this evening possible. For Benton for picking up the food, Leslie for designing the programs and helping coordinate this evening's event. Ray Catania, who flew over from Kauai just to be with us this evening. I also wanted to recognize Elaine Mizrahi, who is a longtime volunteer and supporter of the organization. She's been helping us organize the events for a number of years, and we really appreciate her help. She's a civil service worker, and she's shaking her head. So let's give her a big round. Oh, and we've got a lei for you. Before I hand things over to the people you actually came here to see, I just wanted to mention that since I've been involved, every year this event has gotten bigger and bigger, and it's with the help and support of local labor, of the board. If you like what you hear this evening and you like these events and want to help continue to make it bigger and better every year, please see me, see Leslie, see Ray, or Benton about joining the board to help us make this event bigger and better every single year. So with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Darron Cambra to introduce the T-shirt theater. Thank you, guys.
I know I'm not exactly the person you guys came to see, but I'm just like the metaphorical representation of the organization getting bigger. So they just wanted someone bigger, is what it was. I had the pleasure of performing last year, and it truly is an honor to see so many faces that represent different labor unions come together and support each other, because that's important. I mean, the idea of support and the idea of lifting each other up is really where the strength comes from. And I'm very proud to introduce George Kon. He's been working with T-shirt theater for years. For almost 40 years, the Alliance for Drama Education has been helping Kalihi youth to rehearse for life. In 1980, George Kon and Walt Delaney founded the Alliance for Drama Education. T-shirt theater provides opportunities for students to explore adolescent issues through playwright and performance. Just to give you an idea, in 1980, I was busy getting born. So, and they were putting on T-shirt theater, so it's to give you an idea of how long they've been doing that. But it really is an amazing thing. I'm an educator at Farrington High School, and so I get to see firsthand the effects that T-shirt theater has had on the confidence and public speaking skills of these students. They visit them primarily in 9th grade, and to see like the growth and the confidence and the energy come from these kids after they take the T-shirt theater is really an amazing thing. So please give a round of applause for George.
Mahalo. Aloha. T-shirt theater, and this particular cast is 9 days old, many of them. If they don't have these shirts like this, 9 days, and they're going to perform 2 pieces for you. Walking Through the Door was written for us by Walt Delaney, and it's about the guts that they showed 9 days ago to come to auditions, right? Walking through that door. Leslie, bless her heart, and this organization is giving us an honorarium, and so they will be earning their shirts. We'll start with Walking Through the Door, and then we'll go to our performance calling card, Lai Chi. Rough on the outside, sweet on the inside. 5, 6, 7, 8.
Walking through the door, smiling at the folks, looking the world right in the eyes. Straight out of Farrington, great out of Farrington, how's it world? Kalihi blesses you. You can't catch a wave, snoozing on the shore. You gotta swim out, walk through that ferry door. Stretching up for sorrow, stretching for tomorrow. How's it world? Kalihi blesses you. Kalihi blesses you. Kalihi blesses you. Da 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 da, yeah.
This is the Lai Chi. And that works. 5, 6, 7, 8.
You know there's a fruit that grows on a tree deep in the heart of a place called Kalihi. It's got a hard shell and it's spiky covered hide. And at first you may not think and understand the inside. But take a closer look, my friend, and see what lies within. The inside is really wonderful. Woo! And the outside is just the skin. It's called lychee, home boy vegetation.
Hey, and Vietnamese.
Want some pho?
I love pho.
Hot dog! Europeans, Mexicans, Chinese, Rodden, and Marshallese. Yahweh, 'cause we're all lychee, lychee. So if you're intimidated by my face or by my name, don't forget to look inside because inside we're all the same. Lychee what? Lychee what? Lychee word. There's no need for segregation.
Maroon!
What? Fairy tale!
Oh! That's
Lychee, lychee.
T-shirt theater is a project of
The Alliance for Drama Education.
with funding from
Taxpayer dollars.
voted by
The Hawaii State Legislature.
and administered by
The State Foundation of Culture and the Arts.
introducing the cast and what you'll be calling them in the year 2030.
Adrian, auto mechanic.
Levi, psychologist.
Megan, biomedical engineer.
Christopher, electrical.
Engineer.
Mary Barr, teacher.
Hobie, business manager.
Lehua, photographer. Lonnie, pastry chef. Moana, lawyer.
Ellie, animator.
Vince, headhunter. Michael, electrical engineer.
Isaac, state trooper.
Jasper, Guru. Women caregiver. Christian, massage therapist.
Victoria, film producer. Action.
Krista, college professor.
Sean, a 7-year college student.
Roby, artist.
Ding, stunt double.
Rolly, sexual assault therapist.
And Jay, performing arts. Kervin, civil engineer.
Russo, cinematographer.
Leilani, musician. Johnny, interior designer.
Wa, an actor.
Tui. I'm the professional actor.
My name's Benton. I'm the treasurer for LaborFest, and I just want to thank T-Shirt Theater for that performance once again. We don't have one of the giant checks to present them, but we do have this folded envelope with an honorarium in it. So thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This buys their shirts. Thank you so much.
All right, now I'd like to introduce a local union, Local 5. Earlier last year, workers at several hotels in Waikiki went out on strike. 2,700 of them had the courage to walk away from their jobs and challenge the employer to secure safety and dignity within their workplace. And today they're here to share with us the lessons that they've learned and the experience they gained in doing so, as strikes are not just about stopping the means of production, but about workers learning their power and reminding the employer about that power. So I'd like to invite the workers from the hotel strike to come up here and talk to us about what they learned.
All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Paola Rodelas, and I do the communications and community organizing for Unite Here Local 5. We're a local labor union that represents over 11,000 hotel, healthcare, and food service workers in Hawaii. We're part of Unite Here, which is a labor union in the United States and Canada that represents service industry workers. So as Benton had said, we just went on a 51-day strike. I know many of you were out on the picket line. So for those of you who joined us and supported us in numerous ways, I want to give you all a hand. So thank you. And I especially, because this is LaborFest, in the spirit of LaborFest, I do also want to thank the labor unions that came out and supported us. This is not in any way the full list. I could talk a full 30 minutes about all the different ways that labor came out and stood in solidarity with our strike, but I did want to highlight a few. First of all, IBEW. Came out numerous times on our picket line all throughout those 51 days, and they were gracious enough to host us today. So thank you all. You all donated food and water and time to us. The Sheet Metal Workers Union is another union that as soon as we went on strike, they were about to hold an event at the Sheraton Maui, and they pulled their event out at a cost of over $500,000 to them. The American flight attendants as well, flight attendants stay at hotels, right? And flight crews stay at hotels. And so as soon as they heard about our strike, they pulled out all of the flight crews from hotels like the Sheraton Princess Kaiulani. And then those flight attendants then joined us on the picket line. We had the machinists as well, like Bob Lillis was constantly on the line with us. So just tons of support from the machinist union as well, so thank you. And then the last one I do want to highlight, and again, this is nowhere near the full list. There was just a ton of labor support, and we're very, very grateful for it. But Academic Labor United was not only on the line with us, but they even organized an action at UH Manoa to really put pressure on the TIM school, the Travel Industry Management School. And so we did a big rally over there, and so that was really effective. And it even caused the dean of the TIM school to call us, I think, 3 weeks later, and they organized a meeting where we were able to bring workers to talk to these management professors about the strike and what the main issues were. So thank you for that. So I want to use the majority of this presentation to have some of our workers who are on strike, as well as an organizer, to talk about what it was like to prepare for the strike, and then what it was like to have to hold workers out on the line for 51 days. As Benton said, it was over 2,700 hotel workers in Hawaii from 5 hotels. 4 of them were on Waikiki, 1 of them was on Maui, but we were also part of a nationwide strike that involved 7 other cities on the mainland, and it was a total of about 7,700 workers on strike. Out of all of the cities, Hawaii actually had the lowest scab rate. We had less than 1% of workers cross the picket line. And that in itself is a huge testament to the organizing work that not just our organizers, but the workers themselves did. Because it's not easy to be able to try to convince people to give up pay for 51 days, right? So I'm gonna be calling up some of the workers to just kind of share what kind of work it took to really kind of prepare for the strike and to really make this strike a possibility, as well as talk about just some of the things we've won as well as a result of that strike. So our first speaker is gonna be Jowenna Ellazar, and I'll just have her introduce herself and just kind of share about her experience.
Hi, thank you for having us here today. Thanks, Paola. So my name is Jowenna Ellazar. I am a housekeeper at the Princess Kaiulani. I've been there I just made 4 years, so I'm still pretty new. But one thing I do want to say is that my dad, my uncle, and my 2 cousins are part of the union, also IBEW 1186. They're electricians. But anyways, so we have big union family. So I'm proud to be a union member. Thank you. So one of the reasons why I chose to follow the strike and go on strike with my coworkers is because of the benefits. We know that it's really expensive to have medical and even just a retirement fund. So having a pension fund, benefits like our free medical, and also the raises that we get every year is really important, because as a young family, I know how hard it is to raise a family. So if everything just keeps getting more and more expensive every year, it's harder to, get by. Me and my family we just bought a house in Mililani, but it took 3 incomes just to, you know, get accepted for the mortgage. And that's pretty sad, knowing that it took my dad and my 2 brothers' income. So I don't even know how much harder it's gonna get every year. You know, me and my family personally, I don't know how we're ever gonna get a place of our own because of how expensive it is. So that is the biggest thing for me, is the benefits, because I know if we don't have the benefits that we have now, or fighting for better benefits, who knows, you know, we probably won't even have the house that we have right now. So speaking about family, one job should be enough. I'm pretty sure all of you guys have heard that the past year, one job should be enough. And that really does mean a lot to me, because it already is hard to have personal time with your family and your kids. You know, you want to be there for your children when they grow up. You want them to have memories with mom and dad, right? Not just grandma and grandpa babysitting them. So if a lot of people have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make it by, what does it mean to be a parent? So for me, that's, you know, a big thing for myself. Anyways, so for trying to prepare ourselves for the strike was really, really tough. We had to annoy our coworkers every day, educating them, answering any kind of questions. It was hard. Some people actually wanted to go on strike. They thought it would be fun. But, you know, a lot of the more wiser people were like scared. You know, they're scared. We know we would have to take pay cuts or not even get paid at all. A lot of us were scared, but we had to make sure that we continue to talk to our coworkers and tell them how important it is to be, you know, work together and keep solidarity, and make sure management knows that we're in this all together and they cannot beat us. So during the 51 days of strike, it was really tough. The first couple weeks was very energetic, you know, but after the 3rd, 4th week, our coworkers started to get worried and scared. Me too, you know, money was just running out already. But we just had to make sure that we let them know that if we kept ourselves together, show up into negotiations, and show the management that all of these things that we're fighting for is important, not just for, you know, a raise every year. It's for our families, to make sure that we don't go homeless one day while this top 1% is just getting richer and richer. And that's not fair, because we help them. You know, we are part of their company, so they should have to treat us with respect by giving us the benefits that we need just to live. But after everything was done, when we finally got what we fought for, when we reached that goal, I'm just really proud to see how my coworkers that used to hide from me at work actually came up to the picket lines. They were on the blowhorns, chanting, drumming. They held the lines there while we were in these negotiations all night long. And that is, you know, just seeing people rise up to the occasion was, to me, a miracle, because they, you know, like I said, they run away from me at work when I try to talk to them. But when you see everybody know the goal and everybody is in it together, it's just one of the biggest things for me, is just knowing that they were listening to me even if they're hiding from me. But yeah, we did get what we wanted. It was really, really tough. But honestly, for me, with the whole experience, I wouldn't change it. I would do it all over again, because I know that our workers are solid. Yeah, thank you so much.
Aloha. My name's Dara. I actually work for the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. I am your senior banquet bartender. Oops, sorry. Why did I go on strike? More money, of course, like everybody else. Better medical, pension, I want to secure my future and my retirement. Job security, so that I still have a job in 10, 15 more years, 20 years. A 4-year contract to think of our future, to align us up with, instead of 8 cities, it would be 20 cities. Instead of about 25 hotels, it's going to be 80 hotels. And hundreds of more workers can have the power of one voice. And of course, to stop subcontracting. What does one job should be enough mean to me? To not work 2 or 3 jobs and retire with dignity and health and be able to join my afterlife. How did I prepare myself and coworkers for this strike? I chose to be a committee leader and stand up and attend all union meetings. I typed up my notes on an iPad and snapped a photo to send out mass texts to 15 people on my team. But it wasn't just those 15 people, I realized. It's every time I went to work and I walked through the hallways, I saw someone say, hey, do you know what's going on? No, they did not. Here, give me your cell phone number. I'll put you on my team. I'll put you on my list. So I ended up with about 50 people in the end. I also took a lot of unpaid days off from work to attend negotiations. It was very important to have a seat at the table. If we only had 7 employees that showed up at negotiations, that sends a very poor message toward the ownership. They know they've won already. I wasn't gonna let that happen. I also became part of the core negotiating team by attending so many union sessions for the negotiations. What did I do during the 51-day strike? The first day I came prepared with a bag of cough drops from Costco's to keep everybody's voice loud and cheering. Next, I made a stop to be a lead, not that I wanted to. I went on a picket line and the lead chanter had to walk away. Her shift was POW. So then the business agent, my friend Marshall over here, sneaky, he went to each housekeeper that happened to be at this area, all Filipinos, and they all like, hold the pocketbooks tight. No, but they had the chant sheets. So he's like, please. So I said, oh, it was me or nothing. We could not let them not hear our voice. So I stood up. From that day on, it was 7 to 8 hours a day on a bullhorn for 51 days. Even though I had time off to go to negotiations, I still put in 40 hours a week on the picket line to have a body there. While enjoying my meals, accompanied by our union staff, my favorites were peanut butter and jelly, Vienna sausage, and ham and cheese quesadillas, and all the coffee and water I could dream of. They did not supply sunscreen either. How did I organize my coworkers to stay out for so long? The union provided us with a lot of great tools that were necessary. Our union lawyer typed up a letter to the creditors for our coworkers, our brothers and sisters, that anybody who had a house payment, or car payment, or a personal loan, they could fill in all the information necessary, mail it certified to the bank, and they would postpone this month's payment to the end of term penalty-free. The forethought of our union leaders was amazing. Who knew it was gonna go 51 days though? What else do we have? And then towards the end, to inspire people after we conquered maybe 80% of the contract, after walking out in negotiation sessions, we had to focus people on just one item: why we were still out there, what was most important to us. First is the 4-year contract, check, another more 10 days of walking. We got the room drop for the housekeepers, check, another 10 more days of walking. A holiday came, and then the company caved. So then we got our money for medical, and that was it. Mahalo nui loa for your time.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Lilibeth Herrell. I'm originally from the Sheraton, Waikiki, as a housekeeper. And when the t-shirt theater are performing, I was tearing up because 6 years ago, my daughter was there. And George Kon is her mentor. And I want to tell you my personal story. Well, my marriage ended up 10 years ago, so that's why I have to seek for another job to support my kids. So I was lucky. I got into Sheraton Waikiki, and boom, we don't need the EBT or the what you call that MedQuest. So that's the good thing about working in the hotel that has a union. I never know about union before because I came from the Philippines. All I know is when they're protesting, they're so violent. So in my mind, union is so violent. But then, as my experience, yeah, they throwing rocks, everything in the Philippines. So that's why I'm scared. So they said, one day, they told me to go with them at the rally at the Kaiser in Honolulu. Said, what we gonna do there? I said, so, no, just come. So we went there, sign waving, and then I experienced they honked their horn. I said, why they honking their horn? All we would do is sign waving. I go like that. I said, that means they support us. They said, so, okay, oh my God, it's so fun. And then I step up. I don't know nothing. My organizer said, Lilibeth, can you go to Kauai? Because the negotiation for the Sheraton before, they wanted to separate Kauai, Sheraton Kauai. So all you need to do is go talk to the Filipino housekeeper and tell them to not to give up. So that's my first experience to go to the other island and talk to my fellow Filipinos. And then, okay, this is fun. I think I have a voice, I said. So small like me, I'm scared. And my experience is I came from, I'm a victim of domestic violence. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud because it makes me a strong woman. I have 2 girls. I have 2 girls to support. They are still young when I started at the hotel. And that's why there's so much, it's so hard to live here in Hawaii, especially that you're alone, right? So I learn as the years pass by. I go in and out in the union and learn how they do it. Because I'm even scared to talk to my manager. And I said, okay, I have to step up. So as I learn in and out from the union, I became a strong person. And then when my daughter graduated, I cried. Because I never know that I raised 2 daughters by myself. And, you know, as parents, especially the teenager, right? We are scared if they don't graduate. They're going to get pregnant or anything. So I said, oh my God, this is my moment that I can see that I raised my kids well because they graduate. So my younger one is in junior right now. So she's taking, instead of the t-shirt charter, she take the healthcare academy. So she's longing for a medical researcher. So for me, as an organizer, as a union worker before, because I have the experience to go in and out and learn it at the union, I became an organizer, and now I'm holding the Sheraton in Waikiki, that's my hotel, the Imperial Resort, Kahala Hotel, Sheraton Maui, and the Kaanapali Beach Club. So as an organizer, it's so tough. The workers telling me to, you don't know do shit for me, blah, blah, blah. I said, hey, I do the best I can. But this is how the industry works. And if you are not tough enough to face them, you lose. Like, you have to be brave and tough. So I'm so proud of myself that I'm in that 51-day strike. I organized the workers. It's so hard. 1,000 members at the Sheraton Waikiki. It's so hard, but we did it. That's why right now we are in the 4th year best union here in Hawaii. Thank you.
I think we have some time to open it up for questions if anyone has questions for any of us about the strike, Before we go into that, I just want to add to that. I think a lot of people have been asking us, like, okay, so what's next? We went through this 51-day strike. We won some amazing things. First, I think one of the big reasons why we took on Marriott of all companies is because they're the largest and richest hotel company in the world. They merged with Starwood almost 3 years ago now. And so we knew that it was really, really important that we take them on first. And then once we get a contract with them, then we can pretty much pattern the rest of the hotel contracts that we're negotiating on that Marriott contract. So that's what we're currently doing. We just got a tentative agreement at the Hilton Hawaiian Village, which is great, and it's patterned off of that. So the Hilton Hawaiian Village is the largest Hilton in the world and the largest hotel in Hawaii. So that's huge news. And we have more contracts to settle from there. That's just keep on the lookout. The One Job Should Be Enough campaign continues. And it's not just for hotel workers and not just for Unite Here members, but for everyone, because one job should be enough. But does anyone have any questions? Yes.
51 days is a long time to survive without a paycheck. So in addition to writing letters to your bank to give them more time to pay, how would you let your workers survive?
Yes, we have the strike fund because Eric Gill doesn't want to call this a strike if we don't have enough fund for our workers. So that's it. We pay them $400 a week. Yeah, so just to survive, especially the one with the kids. Yeah.
So to add to that, it was a strike fund that did help us workers a lot. But also before the strike even happened, a few months before, our leaders would tell us, hey, there's a possibility of a strike. You guys cannot go and start buying cars or buying houses or, throwing your money anywhere. You guys have to make sure that you guys start saving, because when the time comes, the $300, $400 a week may not cover. So yeah, they did tell us ahead of time, you guys better start saving your money. And me and my other half, my boyfriend, we took that really seriously. So, from both of us, we did save, about $4,000 just to be safe. So yeah, that a lot of self-determination to make sure we have a savings to back us up did help a lot. Yeah.
When you guys were trying to get everybody organized and to be prepared for the strike, I'm sure you guys had them try to come out to more union meetings and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's workers that were probably even close to maybe retiring, and were probably the ones that were kind of like, don't really care what's gonna happen because I'm on my way out. How did you convince them to come out on the lines with you and maybe not even be naysayers or negative to the younger ones that are on the line?
Yeah, so what we did is that we have all the list of the members, and then we have also already committee leaders. So each committee leaders have 10 groups. So when we look at it, we have about 100 committee leaders. And aside from that, we have key leaders too. So when we call a meeting, I just gonna go talk to my key leaders and committee leaders to come to this meeting. And I said, this is serious. So you guys have to come and plan with us what we should do. Because the power we have, that's what we can get our contract. And to the retirees, they gonna go and retire, we talk to them that they have to mentor the young ones. even though you guys going to retire, you guys still have to help, because if we don't have raise up, you guys doesn't have a raise up when you retire. So they have to rely on to the young ones. So that's how we get them understand, and that's why we got them to strike with us.
Just adding on to that, you would think that, the higher seniorities are like, I'm gonna retire anyway, never mind. Just go, the younger people's time, it's your lower seniorities' time to step up. They have to take care of us now. But some of them did say that, but a lot of them actually knew that if they weren't leading by example, they have a lot of lower seniorities, so they have to make sure that they follow. So a lot of the worry wasn't the retirees, because they knew that if their pension fund wasn't secure, they wouldn't have a good retirement. So a lot of them knew that, if we don't show the younger seniority and, our peers that we don't stay solid on this, we can lose our retirement, or it's not going to be as good as it is, when I retire. So that wasn't too much of a worry for the higher seniority. But like Lilibeth said, we do have a committee system. So I am a committee leader at my hotel, and everyone has a leader. So I have a leader, and it's sort of like a tree, I guess. Eric Gill is the trunk. And then, the message just goes through. I have about 10 people under me. I'm also a key leader, so I cover some other committees. So it's like just messages go down, and that's pretty much how we structure our workers, to make sure that everybody does get some information, or they know who to find if they have questions. That was the main thing, is that our workers knew who to find if they had a question. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Carolyn, and I want to thank you for what you did. You reminded me, yes, because there's a trickle-down effect. You put the other hotels that you weren't striking at on notice. And I wanted to thank you, as I only was on strike for 2 weeks when I worked for the state, and I hated it. It was hot. We had the students screaming at us, throwing things at us, saying, because of you, I'm not going to graduate, blah, 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 blah. And so I know how hard, but I can't imagine. We were there just for 2 weeks. 51 days is like, eternity, thinking of the two. And so I just applaud you and thank you for what you show the rest of the union workers, that they have to stick together, that it's so important. And, my heart goes out to you. I just admire you so much, but thank you for a good memory.
I just wanted to add something, if I could, to what you guys were saying earlier. I had the honor of working briefly for Local 5 during the strike, and I wanted to talk about the role of solidarity between the non-striking workers and the striking workers, and also from the broader community. So there was, there were a fund set up where people could donate. So non-striking workers donated to that fund to support the striking workers. And there was also an incredible amount of solidarity from the broader union community. I think a lot of people in this room, a lot of the labor leaders in this room donated heavily to the fund. And it was really amazing, incredibly powerful, that the role of that solidarity. So thank you very much.
If you could go back and think of something that even more so you could have done to even more better prepare the workers? What would you guys have done?
What we could have been done is call all the workers to come to the negotiation so that they will know what's going on in that negotiation. Because although we have these negotiating committees from all the hotels that are striking, so that's the one that we never done. We only relying to these committees. So yeah, we should next. I hope we're not going to strike again, but that's what we should be done, like inform all the workers to come to that negotiation so that they know. Because they still believe that Kyoya is a good employer. But for that happen, 51 days, now they know that they are hard. It's not like used to be the Kyoya before. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a quick question. Oh, over here. I was just wondering, first of all, I was wondering how many of you have experience of previously having gone on strike? And then I was also wondering what you would say to a large group of workers who probably need to go on strike, and what kind of encouragement you would give them.
For me, honestly, I only worked there for 10 years at the Sheraton Waikiki before I go to the union. I did the one-day strike. Actually, they're non-union, but they are the same employer with the Kyoya. So what they do, the company did is that they wanted to subcontract them to another company. They want to take them out from that company. But because the workers are crying, and they are our brothers and sisters. They're working in our hotel. They are the concierges. And then, so we have a meeting that they are our brothers and sisters, and we have to support them. So on that one-day strike that we have, oh my God, my boss is constantly saying that, Lilibeth, can we get all the workers? I said, don't worry, boss. No, give me the numbers. So like constantly headbanging me like that, and that's why I pushed myself to talk to those workers. Because we have that in the contract that we cannot picket, we cannot strike. So what we did is that in order to support them, then they don't come and work while those workers are on strike. So that's my first strike. And then the 51 days. I never know that we are going through 51 days. But I keep the workers alive. I always say prayers in the picket line so that they're not gonna lose hope. I said, don't worry guys, this is solidarity. We will get what we want. So, and that 51 days, my God, it's so amazing feeling. And we inspire all the workers there, not only us workers that went to the strike, also the non-union. Because Trump raised the wages of his workers because he's scared to his workers that going on, to be in the union. So it's so amazing.
So that question about what we would say to workers who are thinking about going on strike or should go on strike, the main thing is honestly just trust each other. That was a big thing for me. Is I thought I had some, shady coworkers who were gonna scab. Like there's rumors about this person's gonna scab, this person. But honestly, at PK at the Princess Kaiulani, I think we only had maybe 2 or 3 scabs, and they were not even in the housekeeping department. So that was huge for housekeeping. Like we're super proud. And yeah, so the main thing is to trust each other, to just remind them that solidarity is the biggest key in winning anything. So everybody, yeah, thank you. Sometimes the picket lines did get kind of slow, but we know that we're all in that together. A lot of people were scared. A lot of them, there are some workers who were thinking about scabbing already, but we had to make sure that they didn't, because we know that if one person starts scabbing, people will follow, because that just makes you even more scared. So yeah, just the solidarity is the hugest key, making sure that we are all helping each other, praying for each other, just talking to each other every day and letting them know we're one step closer. Every negotiation that we have, we're one step closer. And hey, by the end of it, we did get, the big thing that we're striking for. And people are like, yeah, like, we're all proud and like, yes, thank God we stuck together. Thank God we didn't scab, because we wouldn't have won what we won. So just knowing now what we know now, solidarity is the hugest thing to make sure you win. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I want to compliment your team and your leadership at how well you prepared before the strike. You talked about, the expenses and everything else, but you did a lot of other rallies ahead of this strike, and that prepared the people to feel comfortable doing this. You're very aware of people's comfort zone. You just didn't tell them one day, let's all go on strike. You did a bunch of rallies ahead of time. You kept doing stuff. You kept bringing the people out. I was amazed with you guys. I truly were that they say prepare for war. The person who prepares for war will win the battle. The battle's won before, and it was your preparation, your leadership preparation, that allowed you guys to do it, and it was absolutely incredible watching the pre-work before the meetings, talking to your workers, listening to their concerns, that whole 9 yards. You guys were fantastic, and I was proud to walk with you guys. I truly were, and thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
First of all, I'd like to say that I am a pensioner from the ILWU. I worked for the pineapple industry for 43 years. We striked in the late 60s, and who was our leaders? Women like yourselves. We followed them because they were strong women like you guys are, and when they told us we had to strike, we striked. But my question to you guys is, from my own experience, we had husbands and wives working together, and it was a really tough situation for the families. So how did you guys manage to actually go through that with both husband and wife working for the same company?
Well, we're not married yet, my boyfriend and I, but he is in the housekeeping department at the Sheraton Waikiki, and then I'm at the Princess Kaiulani. So, like I said before, we really did take it seriously when our union leaders told us that we need to save our money and make sure we don't go on shopping sprees or trips or anything like that, because the day might happen, and it did. And we're thankful that we did take that seriously, and we saved, every penny until that call or that text was sent to us that today is the day. Yeah, so not only me and my boyfriend, but my brother also, he works at the Sheraton Waikiki, and we all live under the same roof. So that was 3 incomes that were pretty much cut in half. But him too, he also followed my guidance. I told him, you better save money, because you're by yourself. Your girlfriend doesn't live with us. So he also took that advice, and yeah. It was hard though. A lot of husband and wives did work at the 4 properties, and I think it was the same thing, just really taking it seriously that a strike may happen. Even if it did end up that way, at least you're prepared. Like he said, preparation is key, and because most of the families were prepared for it, we were able to stay out for 51 days. Yeah.
Thank you. Did any one of the guests get so upset that they came and joined you? I want to hear a happy story, other than the fact that you won your strike.
Yeah. Well, our hotel, we're like on one of the main roads, our picket lines. So we did have a lot of our guests come and, you know, give us a shout out and say thank you for doing what you're doing. We understand what you're doing. We're not upset that you're making a lot of noise. One of our chants were, don't check in, check out. A lot of the guests did end up checking out to support us. So that was, you know, huge to hear.
So part of our agenda for the guests staying inside the hotel is we leafleted outside and inside the hotel saying, welcome to our labor dispute. Sorry the owners did not notify you in advance. They knew about it. We also called all our clients that had incoming events to the properties, forewarned them and told them to add a clause to the contract saying that if we were on strike, they would get a refunded deposit and rebook with us after the strike so that only union workers would wait on them. And we got a lot of events canceled. Thank you to the cold calling of our staff at Local 5. We also had a lot of hotel guests, once they understood why we were on strike about a labor dispute, they checked out and they chose another union property to stay in. So we did succeed on all fronts.
Thank you, Local 5, for showing us how it's done. Hopefully you guys won't have to do that again for a very, very long time. I know it was exhausting. So right now I want to introduce Damien Kim, who's the head of IBEW here. He's going to introduce our keynote speaker and the rest of the agenda. So here's Damien. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you. Sorry, I had some noise out there. We were scheduled to clean out and scrub the bathrooms, so when you go to the restrooms, please be careful because the floors might be a little wet. Just giving you a little warning. But, you know, I just want to echo, thank you guys for what you did. You know, hopefully, like you said, strike is never good, and, you know, you don't want to go out on one, but we may be facing one here locally with us with Spectrum TV, and we're going to negotiations. And Charter Communications, the owner, has been giving problems throughout the mainland, and we assume it's going to come here to the same thing here in Oahu. So we want to stand in solidarity, and, you know, the question was brought up about how do you get everybody involved, and, you know, just listening to you guys talk is some really good ideas, so I appreciate it. Thank you guys for all of that. But again, I'm honored and privileged here today, especially to introduce our next guest speaker. Gordon Lafer is a professor of labor education and research center at the University of Oregon. He's the author of The 1% Solution, How Corporations Are Remaking America One State at a Time. And I've seen his book is in the back over there. He has served as a senior policy advisor for the United States Congress and has been called to testify as an expert witness multiple times before state legislators. Tonight, Mr. Lafer will present on the privatization of public workers and the corporate lobby's attack on public education. So please join us in welcoming Gordon Lafer.
What I want to talk about is a nationwide attack by the biggest corporate lobbies in America that ultimately is aiming to destroy public schooling. Some of this is about labor, some of this is about destroying the quality of jobs of people who work in schools, but a bigger part of it also is about destroying our kids' right to a decent education as just a right because we live here. So I got asked to talk about that. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about charter schools as part of that. And a lot of stuff that I want to tell you, you know, there's some things, including education and including laws about charter schools, that are better in Hawaii than they are in a lot of the rest of the country. And so some of the things I want to show you maybe seem like, you know, bad science fiction or something. But it's important to know how bad things are and because this is policy that's being pushed around the country by the biggest and most powerful political actors in the country, which is the big corporate lobbies. So I want to explain that and then say some at the end about how unions and especially teachers' unions are fighting back against this. So to start with, we've seen in the last decade, there's been more laws passed about education than anything else, starting in 2011. Across the country, there are laws passed about a lot of different parts of the school system. This map is the states just in 2011 and 12 that passed laws either killing tenure or changing the terms of tenure or making teachers' pay tied to student test scores, and in other ways trying to degrade the role of teachers. And we say, like, why did this happen? All of a sudden in 2011, there was a wave of legislation about schooling that has gone across most of the country. And part of that has been the privatization of schooling through charter schools and vouchers. So we say, why did it happen? Sorry, I keep pointing that way. One thing that is not the answer is we didn't have all these new laws because suddenly there was a crisis of falling test scores or rising dropout rates. This is math and reading scores for the last 40 years, and they're basically flat. There was no big crisis in schooling. What happened was a change in the politics. And as probably many people know, in January of 2010, the Supreme Court decided a case called Citizens United that said corporations are allowed to spend unlimited money on politics. What the case technically said is that both unions and corporations are allowed to spend unlimited amount of money on politics, but there's no union that was sitting on a big pile of cash just waiting for permission to spend it on politics. But corporations were, right? And the comparison is there's no comparison. If you look at just the Fortune 500, which is the 500 biggest corporations in America, their annual revenue is more than 450 times more than all of the dues collected by all of the unions in the United States. So what these two things are, this is spending on state politics, both governors, ballot initiatives, and legislatures in the 2 election cycles before and after the Citizens United decision. And by the way, Leslie, LaborFest has these slides. If anybody wants any of these slides, you're welcome to get them from Leslie. You can take pictures, but you don't have to. You can also get the slides. Right, so over here, the red line is corporate spending, and the blue is labor spending. And you can see in 2008, even before Citizens United, the labor movement was way outspent by corporations. But after Citizens United, it got much more exaggerated. Corporate political spending increased by 300% between 2008 and 2012 nationally. So we had this sea of corporate spending, and a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's bad, there's too much money in politics, but we have to look more concretely, like, well, what are they doing with their money? So they have all this new power, what do the corporations try to do? And what I want to show you is what are they doing in education. When we say corporate money, right, who we're talking about, the 3 biggest lobbies in the United States is the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, and the National Federation of Independent Business. At the state level, the main body that corporations coordinate their politics through is called the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC. I can ask, how many people here know about ALEC? Okay, so I'll just say briefly, for those who haven't heard of it, ALEC is a collection of several hundred of the biggest corporations in the country. This is a very partial list. And it's companies that we all know and use, like Walmart, Walgreens, Coke and Pepsi, Ford and GM, Microsoft and Facebook and Google, the drug companies, the banks are all members of ALEC. About a quarter of all state legislators in the country are members of ALEC. They pay $50 a year in dues. They meet 4 times a year in nice resorts where they sit in committees that are made up half of state legislators and half of corporate lobbyists. And they write bills together. And then those bills get introduced in state after state around the country, right? And some of this was tracked by, I can say as a professor, we get given software to see if students are cheating, right? So students turn in papers and you run it through some software that does a string search to see if they got this from someplace else. People use that same software to track ALEC's bills. They say, oh, this bill that says we the people of Arizona believe blah, 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 and it's the same as we the people of Tennessee and we the people of whatever. ALEC estimates that it introduces 1,000 bills a year and 200 get passed into law. So they write the bills, corporate lobbyists write the bills, and then these same corporations give money to those politicians' campaigns, run their own political ads on digital media and broadcast media, and fund state-level think tanks, so-called think tanks, that put out white papers and experts who appear in the media. So it's a very well-coordinated 50-state campaign to try to remake the laws that govern the economy and that govern the public sector. So what they're doing in education, to start with, is budget cuts. I think that Hawaii is not on this because they didn't report data. I'm not sure why that is, but this shows 2008 to 2015 per pupil spending in all the states, that there were huge cuts that were not replaced even after the recession. If you look down at the bottom, the big growth is in North Dakota. It's not because North Dakota is like an education hero. In North Dakota, they discovered oil in 2010. So everything's booming in North Dakota. But what we see in state after state after state is really deep budget cuts in education that have not been restored still now, 10 years after the recession hit. And not only that, but one of the things that is striking is that when you look at the legislative history of how the cuts to the education budget were made, they don't look like legislators saying, oh my God, this is terrible, it's 2010, we're in a financial crisis. I hate that we have to cut schools, but we have no choice, and as soon as the economy's better, we'll restore it. It's easy to write a law that has a snapback provision in it that says when state revenues get back up or when the unemployment rate gets down to whatever you want to say, that funding will automatically be restored. None of them did that. Instead, 12 different states enacted new tax cuts for rich people and corporations at the same time that they were cutting schools and healthcare. Ohio, for instance, in the same year that it eliminated full-day kindergarten, also eliminated the state's inheritance tax that had only ever affected the 7% richest people in the state. One of the most dramatic examples is Arizona, which is here. Arizona completely eliminated preschool funding, kicked 100,000 4-year-olds from low-income families out of state-funded preschool. And at the same time, in the same year, by the same legislators, backed by the same corporate lobbies and legislation that the Chamber of Commerce celebrated, instituted new tax cuts for corporations and the rich. And then they passed something, we live in this like Orwellian time when everything is named it's like the polluters industry is always called Citizens for a Green Economy and all that. So they have something they call a taxpayer's Bill of Rights. What a taxpayer's Bill of Rights does is it goes into the state constitution and it says the legislature can never raise taxes by more than a combination of population growth and inflation. So it says like on a per person basis, the public services that you have now is the best you can ever have. You can't ever make it better. So Arizona passed something like that, put it into their constitution in this same year, which means, in other words, they're saying they're making drastic cuts in the worst year of the economy since the Great Depression, and then they're locking them in as the high water mark of the best school can ever be. They're saying you will never put 4-year-olds back in preschool if you're in low-income families, right? So we need to look at this and understand that they looked at cuts to education not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. They've been thinking the public sector is too fat, we need to cut it down to size, and we have the opportunity of a fiscal crisis, let's use it and lock it in. So we need to start thinking, like when you think about those companies, like what is it? Why it's not like a mistake that education got underfunded. Why do they want it to be this way? So some of this I want to try to explain and show what the different pieces are. But when we look at their, at the whole agenda, right, and these are laws, some of them get passed in one state and not in another state, but at the agenda of all the different education-related laws that the corporate lobbies are passing, I want to take a minute to walk through these, to talk about some of them, and to talk about how they fit together. So budget cuts is the one thing. Larger classes, which in most places is just forced by budget cuts, but there are states where the legislature has actively voted to say we want to raise the class size caps in our state and let there be larger classes. Restricting union rights has happened all over the place, either getting rid of unions entirely. Teachers in Tennessee lost the right to collective bargaining. Teachers in a bunch of other states lost the right to collective bargaining. Or they say you can still bargain, but there's a lot more subjects that you can't bargain over. You can't bargain over class size. You can't bargain over technology. You can't bargain over merit pay. And so they make bargaining smaller and smaller things. They do away with tenure and seniority. They pass laws that deprofessionalize teaching by lowering the licensing and certification criteria. And this is something, if you ask most parents think the standards for becoming a teacher should be higher, not lower. If you ask people, should somebody have to be a student teacher and be mentored by a more experienced teacher for a year before they get sole responsibility for a classroom, it's like everybody, Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. It's not a partisan issue. But the laws have been going in the other direction. They say we want alternate routes to certification. We'll give you life experience credit. Or in the worst case, they start saying you don't have to be certified. And this is a lot of what happens in charter schools. They say in some states, charter school teachers do not have to be certified, or they can only be 50% of them can be certified. And they're kind of dumbing down what it means to be a teacher. And this is being done intentionally. Together with that, we have a huge explosion of both charter schools and vouchers, which are two different ways to basically privatize the school system. Vouchers are programs where they'll say, let's take the total amount of money we spend in the state per student, and we'll give each family a voucher for that amount of money, and you can use it wherever you want. In a public school, in a private school, in a charter school, whatever you want, that's your money. So the whole thing gets privatized. And charter schools are privately run schools that are publicly funded. So ultimately, I think what they're aiming to is the complete privatization of the system, and also a critical part that I don't know how much has been here is replacing human teachers with applications, with digital applications. The reason this is being pushed is because that lobby, ALEC and the Chamber of Commerce, passes laws that says completely online schools or completely online classes have to get the same dollars per student from the state as an actual physically existing school in a building with an experienced teacher, right? Let's say I open something up and I can say it's going to be entirely online, and I have a canned curriculum because I bought it from somebody, and something like that. The first time you develop it, it costs money, but after the first time you have it, the next million times you reproduce it online doesn't cost anything. So because of this, the profit margins are enormous, and because of this, every Wall Street bank has opened a special division just for K-12 education. The venture capital industry, the private equity industry are all heavily, heavily focused on the technology of education, on basically replacing teachers with technology, and then have gotten very politically active. I don't know if this has happened here, but it used to be that there was no money in school board races, right? People would run for school board on very, very small campaigns. Now we've had year after year where we have the most expensive school board races ever. In Los Angeles last year, there was over $20 million spent for one candidate, one position on the school board race. And the reason this has happened is because Wall Street and finance and venture capital firms and big technology firms like Microsoft and Netflix and Facebook are spending money on school board elections. And it's not because suddenly their hearts swelled with care about the kids in school. It's because there's money to be made all of a sudden in school in ways that there hadn't been before. So, and when you put that together, in a way, people say, why do you want to dumb down what teachers are? If what you're moving towards is a system where teachers are not professionals whose job is supposed to think creatively about the kids I have in front of me and how am I going to make this interesting or exciting or engaging for them, but just content deliverers who either are just delivering a standard curriculum or ultimately who are replaced most of the day or all of the day by a digital application, then you don't need people with tenure and you don't need people with training. You want lower wage people who are going to do a dumbed down job and just push through things for kids to memorize and pass tests on. I told you this was going to be a downer compared to the strike victory. But it gets better at the end, right? So there is a huge industry now, and they have conventions every year. There are conventions where you have school officials, finance people, and a million different people coming up with applications for different parts of education. People, you go to these conventions like, I have an app for 9th grade geometry. I have an app to replace guidance counselors, things I wouldn't have thought possible. I have an app for special education. These applications have never been, almost none of them have ever been tested. They don't come from teachers, they don't come from parents. They come from people mostly who have one thought, which is kids seem to be bored in school but like video games, right? And so there are some kids who, if you say, I'm going to make math into a game, you have to solve the problem to cross the river or whatever it is. There are some kids for whom that's good for, but there are a lot of other kids who that's not the way they learn, right? And this becomes the only way that anybody is allowed to learn, because this is the way, this is where the profit is. And I want to say, like, this is not about being anti-technology. If you look at the schools that rich kids go to, they use a lot of technology too, but rich kids are encouraged to be active users of technology. So in rich kids' school, they're making films, they're laying out magazines, they're doing graphics, they're writing books, they're recording things. In poor kids and working class kids' schools, they're encouraged to be passive users of technology, where they're hooked up to these video game-based apps and there's nothing active about it, right? You're just solving the problems to move ahead, and there's only one way for everybody to learn. So I spent time studying one of these schools, a chain of charter schools called Rocket Ship. It's based in the Bay Area, but it's expanded to poor cities around the country. It's in Milwaukee, Nashville, Washington, D.C. And I just want to tell you about this because it's one of the examples of the way they want to drive it. So Rocket Ship is not entirely online. It's a school that people go to, but kids starting in kindergarten spend a quarter of their day in teacherless classrooms on these video game-based apps. The curriculum is almost entirely shrunk down to reading and math. They have no recess starting in kindergarten. There's no recess. The schools have no playgrounds, have no gyms. They have no foreign languages. They have no libraries. They have no art. They have no music. They have no separate science or social studies. And the school tests them on the standardized tests 8 times a year. And then they say, okay, whatever we see what you got wrong, and then we're going to work backwards and say, okay, so for the next 6 weeks or whatever it is, you need to work on this and this and this. It's basically like all test prep all year long in order to get their test scores up, and then that's how they market themselves. They say, hey, we have high test scores over here. All right? This is a school which is a darling of venture capital and of the high-tech industry. And I want to say something about how does the business end of this work. Because most of these schools, the schools themselves are nonprofit. So Rocket Ship is a nonprofit school. 2 of the backers that helped expand the school are Reed Hastings over there, who's the founder and CEO of Netflix, and this guy over here who runs a venture capital fund in San Francisco. So Rocket Ship is nonprofit, but then Rocket Ship contracts its math software from this company called Dreambox, that is one of these companies that produces math, and you just solve the problems and work through your software. Dreambox is for profit. And 2 of the main owners of Dreambox are those same 2 guys, right? So they fund this nonprofit school, and as the nonprofit school grows to more and more school, it's a school corporation, it grows, and it contracts with a for-profit company that has to use that software. Now, one of the reasons why they like charter schools instead of public school districts is, first of all, public school districts, you have to sell to every individual different district. They each make their own decision. Second of all, public schools are under ethics laws, right? The superintendent of a school or a principal can't contract with their brother-in-law to provide the food or to provide the software, right? They have to do it just on the basis of what's good for the education of the kids, and they can't say, if you contract with us for the math curriculum, then we'll give you a loan or we'll give you $100,000 in free laptops or something like that. They like charter schools, and because some of the charter school chains, now the biggest chains are more than 100 schools nationwide, right? And they're growing all the time. They say they have one point of sale. There's one CEO who they have to convince. It's not subject to ethics laws. It's not subject to public records laws. And they have the same software every place. I went to one of these schools when I was doing this research, and I talked to the principal, and I said, so I'm sure the software is good for some kids. What happens if you have some kids and you say, this isn't really helping them learn, right? Because especially in young kids, 5- and 6-year-olds, there are kids who will learn by video games. There's kids who learn by counting on their fingers. There's kids who learn by manipulating blocks. There's kids who learn by drawing and telling stories, right? There's people learn in different ways. I said, what happens if you have somebody, are you allowed to say, oh, these kids we're not going to use the software for? They said, no. I said, well, what if you think maybe they'd learn by software, but not this software? I'm the principal of the school. I think there might be a different software package. Can you do that? No. Only the corporate people in California can do that. Right? So this is one-size-fits-all education because it's driven by profit. And even if the school is nonprofit, they have these business relationships that are not allowed in public schools by ethics laws that makes it drive by a profit strategy. So I would say essentially, like, in the same way that Wall Street looks at Social Security and says, this is a huge amount of money guaranteed by the government, and it's not in our hands, and we want to get a piece of it, right? Wall Street looks at public education and says, this is $600 billion, which is about what it is in America. This is $600 billion of government guaranteed money flowing through the economy every year, and we don't have a piece of it, or we don't have a big enough piece of it. And everything that they're doing about charter schools and vouchers ultimately is trying to create a market for themselves, which is primarily around technology because it's so profitable. So this is Reed Hastings saying the problem of selling to school districts is that they don't adopt technology very quickly because they're reacting to voter forces more than market forces. That's the problem, right? He says you'll sell most to school districts, but the best friend of the technology movement is charter schools because charter schools will drive product adoption, right? So for them, charter schools is a way to build their market and eventually to take over the whole public schools. Just to talk about charter schools for a minute, it's not like there's not good charter schools. There are good and bad schools of every kind. And particularly there are charter schools that I know in Hawaii, there are charter schools that provide Hawaiian language and Hawaiian cultural education that otherwise would not be available to students. And I think that's the purpose for which charter schools were originally created, not to be a business, but to provide something that is experimental or that is different from what's otherwise available in the system. And there are good charter schools that should continue. In general, the idea that charter schools are better than public schools is not true. This is the most recent math score comparison that basically shows it's the same. But when we think about, and I believe this is true in Hawaii, it's true in most states, when charter schools were originally created, which was like late 1980s, early 1990s, they were pictured as a series of experiments where every school would be trying something new. They'd be freed from all the rules of the school system to try something experimental. This is the guy who wrote the law in California, saying they wanted it to be the research and development lab for the school system where charter schools would pioneer new things and then the rest of the school system could learn from it. But what we have now is like chains of 100 schools in one corporation, and they're not experiments. Every one of those 100 schools is exactly the same. And for the most part, this is research from California, where you say, well, are they doing something different? Like the idea of charter schools is we want something new, different, or better, but that was never written into the law. In California, 3/4 of the charter schools perform worse, if you believe in test scores, perform worse than nearby public schools that serve the same kind of students. But the law in California doesn't say, and I think this is true in Hawaii as well, like it doesn't say a school has to provide something that is not otherwise offered, or has to provide something different or new than what now exists in the school system. So here, I think it's still a pretty modest part of the school system. I was doing research in Oakland where 30% of the students are in charter schools now, and there's nothing in the law that says it has to be better than anything else, and it's not better than anything else. I won't walk through all these numbers here, but I was thinking about this and looking at the things that are better in the law in Hawaii than they are in California, where I did research and in other places. And this is one of the things that you may or may not be aware of, but that is really important, is that up until now, at least in Hawaii, when students go to a charter school, the state authorizes additional money from them. It doesn't take it from the currently existing school system. In most of the rest of the country, that's not true. So for instance, and this is just something to be aware of in case this proposal comes up here, to be careful about not going down this road. In California, if they say, all right, we spend, I don't know, $7,000 per student, When a student says, I'm not going to go to a traditional public school, I'm going to go to a charter school, that money goes with them, and their school district loses the money. It's the total amount of money per student, right? So if a school loses 10 students, they lose $70,000. But they have a lot of fixed costs that they can't cut. They can't not have a principal and an assistant principal and a counselor. They can't not pay the heat. They can't not pay for the building. And because all of those things can't be cut, what they cut is they cut art, they cut music, they cut physical education, they let the class sizes get bigger, they cut teacher salary. And so you have more and more cuts and worse education in the traditional public schools. This was a study last year of San Diego, Oakland, and a smaller school district that showed that in San Diego, the public schools in San Diego have a net loss of $65 million a year because of charter schools. That's $65 million a year that is cut out of the services to the students who remain in public schools. So this is one of the things I would beware of. It's also true that for the most part, in most parts of the country, the neediest and most expensive to educate students are in the public schools and not charter schools. If you look at special education students, charter schools educate a lower percentage of special ed students and students with the more mild needs. So in Oakland, for instance, charter schools will educate students with dyslexia or ADHD, but not kids with autism or traumatic brain injury. Those kids are all in the regular public schools. There's also all kinds of needs that are not captured in the data. Students who are going in and out of the juvenile justice system. Charter schools don't take those kids. Oakland has 1,000 kids a year who come across the border with Mexico and come by themselves without their families, show up in the middle of the school year, have all kinds of needs. Those kids don't go into the charter schools. So what we have is the neediest kids concentrated in public schools without the money to take care of them. And for some people in the charter industry, this is their goal. Their goal is to crash the system. This is a woman who works for a Gates Foundation funded center, think tank in Washington. She says their main theory of action has been the tipping point strategy. The idea was to concentrate growth, she means growth of charter schools, in targeted cities until districts either responded to competition or were entirely replaced by charters. If the typical urban district were a soda machine, it's been wobbling back and forth while reformers, meaning charter school reformers, are trying to push it over, right? They're trying to get to the point where big urban school systems will crack financially. And the end result of that could be a couple of different things, but none of them good, is probably either we're gonna have complete privatization of the school system, or we're gonna say the fault is workers' pensions. And we have to raid the pensions and make teachers and bus drivers and food service workers and custodians pay for this by giving up their pensions. And they're pushing both of those things. I think that when we think like, why are the big corporations trying to do this? And people say, well, isn't it irrational for them, like all those corporations in ALEC, to cut education because don't they need Americans both to be educated workers and to buy their stuff? And I think part of the difference between our time and earlier times is the degree of globalization and the number of companies, legally American companies, that make a majority of their money abroad. That do they need Americans? Yeah, but less than ever before. And they're divesting from the school system, but I think there's another part of it. You know, we're in an economic crisis where life is getting harder, has been getting slowly but steadily harder for a majority of working people for 40 years. If you look at what the 1% say, what the super rich people say, they think the United States is an empire in decline, that it's going down, and they don't see any path that they're willing to take to reverse that. So the political problem for them is, how do you manage the politics of decline? How do you pursue politics where you're going to make things more and more unequal without provoking a political backlash? And I think part of that has to do with managing people's expectations. And this does get back to union organizing. You know, in union organizing, people often talk about wanting to ignite a revolution of rising expectations, where it's like if you work someplace and your boss is an asshole and you file a grievance and you beat them, you feel emboldened. You're like, oh, I won this grievance, like maybe I'm gonna get involved in the contract campaign. And if you get in the contract campaign and you go out on strike and you win, some people think, oh, maybe now I'm going to try to change who the mayor is, or I'm going to try to change who the governor is. Like every victory you have makes you raise your sights higher and get more ambitious. I think what the corporate lobbies are trying to do is to get us all into a revolution of falling expectations, where I feel like, okay, my kid's in a class with 36 kids, which mine is, but at least it's not 40. They only have like music and phys ed for 9 weeks a year, which is what we have in Oregon, but at least we have it for 9 weeks a year. Or I only have catastrophic health insurance. I don't have comprehensive health insurance, but at least if I have to go to the hospital, I have that, and like so far I'm not sick. Or I don't have any paid vacation, but you know, I'll have time off in between this job and my other job. The more we like ratchet down what we think we have a right to demand, either of the government as citizens or of our bosses as employees, it normalizes the experience of downward mobility in a way that makes the politics of decline safe for the 1%. And I think school is an essential piece of this. Like if you ask people in the United States, what do you have a right to just because you live here? It's a really short list, right? You don't have a right to health care necessarily. You don't have a right to a house. You don't necessarily have a right to food and water. People think we have a right for our kids to get a decent education and a right for the mail to be delivered. And both those things are under attack, right? And it's not like there's not a lot of crappy schools. There's a lot of crappy public schools. But when there are, at least there's somebody you can yell at who in theory is supposed to be responsible for making sure your kid gets a decent education. What they want education to be like is like health insurance. I won't speak about Hawaii, but any place I've ever been, everybody hates their health insurance. But it's like, well, what are you going to do? You know, maybe I should have worked out more. I should have eaten more healthily. I should have been a smarter consumer. I should have done something, right? There's nobody who, even in theory, is responsible for me having good and affordable health insurance. But there is in school. And when they talk about wanting to do away with the entitlement mentality in America, they're not just talking about Social Security. They're talking about school. This is the head of one of these corporate-funded think tanks. And he says, elementary and secondary schooling in the US is the country's last remaining socialist enterprise, right? And in some ways, this is like, you know, exaggerated craziness, but in some ways, he's right? The idea that we have an idea that just because you live here, we're gonna tax the rich and guarantee a decent quality of education to all kids is one of very few things like that. They don't like it because it's big and because it's school, and they don't like it because it's dangerous. Because if we can tax the rich and say everybody's going to get school, right, then you could start thinking the same thing about public transit or public housing or public health care. It's like a dangerous idea. So I think this is part of where they're trying to go is to break the school system, to privatize it in a way that has huge profits for Wall Street and the finance industry, and that fundamentally dumbs down the quality of education that most people's kids will get. One part of this is privatization of school services, which I know is part of the thing that we're going to talk about and has come up here. In most places, the law is even worse than it is in Hawaii. When public schools become charter schools, the charter school is a private employer and can contract out the custodial work or the food service work or theoretically even the teaching work to a private contractor, and those people lose their status as public employees and lose their union contracts and become private workers and always have their wages and benefits dramatically cut. So there's a couple things I want to say about this. One, this is part of their business model, part of how they make money, even in teaching, right? There's a lot of what charter schools do is they have young teachers. They'll contract with Teach for America to get 22-year-olds with 6 weeks of training being the sole teachers. They know they're going to quit after 2 years, but that's okay because nobody ever gets very high on the salary scale. Nobody ever gets a pension. Nobody gets old enough to have very expensive health insurance needs. And they spend a lot less on teachers because they're always cycling through people who stay for 2 or 3 years and then leave. When we contract out school support services, first of all, it's always like the quality is worse. When you have a school custodian is part of the team of adults who are responsible for the kids in that school and knows those kids and does all kinds of things that a company like Sodexo, who has a team of people that comes through at night and cleans 4 or 5 different schools, will never do. But it's also going against anything that we know about what makes education to say we're going to take vulnerable people in the community and we're going to cut their wages and benefits. Since No Child Left Behind started, since standardized testing started in schools, by far the most powerful thing that correlates with test scores is how much money your parents have. Since the start of No Child Left Behind, there has never been a group of poorer students that scored higher than richer students no matter what else was true, what kind of school they were going to, if they were going to private or public or charter or whatever. Nothing matters as much as socioeconomic status. So you cannot say, I'm against unions, I'm against the living wage, I'm against family health insurance, but I'm for education for working class kids. It's not, the things can't be true at the same time. But we have those same corporate lobbies that are coming in trying to privatize education are the same lobbies that are lobbying against the minimum wage, against a right to paid sick leave, against family leave, against all the things that we're fighting for. Let me just, before I wrap up, I just want to say, sometimes the corporate lobbyists will say, oh, the things you're worried about, these aren't really that important. Big class size, small class size, it's no important. I've seen places where state legislators will say, well, when these kids get to college, they're going to be in 200 kids in a lecture class, so we're helping them get college ready by having them be 50 kids in high school, right? There's a lot of research over a long time to know like what is a good education and what's bad education, but there's a very simple way to know what is good education, which is where do rich people send their kids to school? This is Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor of Chicago fighting the Chicago Teachers Union during their strike. He sent his kids to the University of Chicago Lab School, where their student-teacher ratio, I think, is 7-to-1, and they have tennis courts and libraries and art and drama and philosophy and foreign languages and counselors. This is Punahou, student-teacher ratio of 11-to-1. All students study music every year. Most do theater or visual arts, outdoor education, theoretical physics, foreign language, right? What rich people's kids have is small classes taught by experienced teachers in a broad curriculum, right? I could say in one sentence, like, what is my education policy? Is that my kid and everybody's kid deserves the same education that Rahm Emanuel's kids have. Right? We don't need more research than that. And okay, a little after all that downer, like here's a few hopeful signs, right? One thing is that the corporate agenda is very unpopular, and unpopular on a bipartisan basis. They're very powerful, so they can buy a lot of politicians and they can pass a lot of laws, but when you ask people like point by point, do you support their agenda, it's very unpopular. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. This is Florida. Florida had small class sizes written into their constitution. It was no more than 18 kids from kindergarten to third grade and then 24 kids after that. The legislature wanted to raise the class size caps, but because it was in the Constitution, they had to go to the voters, right? So they went to the voters and the legislators all supported it, the voters rejected it. This was 2010, which was the Tea Party wave election. Florida elected a Tea Party, very right-wing governor, very right-wing legislator, and if you do the math, there must have been at least 300,000 people who voted thinking something like, I hate Democrats, I hate government, I hate taxes, but I want my kid in small classes, right? The quality of education is something that cuts across party lines, and people who will vote for very different candidates when we can organize around the issue are on our side on this issue. This is Idaho, which is very deep red conservative state. Idaho voted by voter referendum to reject laws that their legislators had passed that abolished tenure, made teachers pay based on test scores, restricted collective bargaining, and required kids to take online classes. So we have very broad support. I just want to say a couple words about the Chicago teacher strike, which was in 2012. That really started a new era for teachers unions in the United States. Not every place, but in the best case. There were a couple of things that were new about the Chicago teacher strike. The first is, until this point, if you ask teachers unions in America, what sucks about the school system, people could talk forever. If you said, what's our vision? How do we think the schools should work? Nobody had anything to say. Right? The Chicago Teachers Union was, was taken over by a left-wing reform movement within the union that was opposed by the national leadership of the AFT. And they spent a year working with teachers and working with parents and created their positive vision that they produced this thing called The Schools Chicago Students Deserve. And then they went on strike over this. It was also the first strike, like, of course the strike was about money, but the strike was also about these things. These are all things they won. More music, art, and phys ed teachers, more social workers and nurses. In Chicago, they had to strike to get textbooks for their kids on the first day of school because there were classes where they wouldn't get the textbooks until October 15th. keep class size caps, and not make teachers' evaluation be based on test scores. These are also things where, until this strike, in most teachers' unions in America, teachers were complaining about this all the time. Class sizes are too big, we don't have counselors, blah, blah, blah. And the union's response was like, yeah, that's really bad. But that's not what we do. What we do is we negotiate wages and benefits. And it was a change on the union's part also to say, what does the union do is we have to take responsibility as teachers for the quality of education as the kids and the quality of our profession as teachers. And the strikes we've had in the last couple of years have all followed on the Chicago model. Some of them have literally been led by people who were on strike and organizers in the Chicago strike. One of the leaders of the strike in Arizona is a woman who was an organizing committee member like you guys here. Maybe you'll go someplace else and lead other hotel workers out on strike. She was on strike in Chicago, moved to Arizona, and 6 years later became a leader of the Arizona strike. So the strikes in 2018 in West Virginia and Kentucky and Arizona and earlier this year in Los Angeles and Oakland have all been like this, right? They've of course been over money, but they've been for smaller classes, for new textbooks, for lab equipment, for more counselors, nurses, and social workers, for a limit to charter school privatization. And in some places like West Virginia and LA, they said, we're not going to take a raise unless all school employees, meaning not just teachers, but custodians, food service, bus drivers get a raise. In West Virginia, they said, we're not going to settle our strike until all state employees get a raise. So, and what we've seen is like tremendous public support for these strikes in ways that nobody expected. Like it was only 10 years ago that the corporate lobbies were running ads saying, everybody should remember, I want everybody to remember the teacher you hated who couldn't be fired because they had a union and tenure. And this is what's so terrible about unions is they protect the teachers we hated. Like I remember the teachers I hated who I would have wanted to fire. Like I still remember them. And I remember the teachers who my kid has who I hate. But, but then you think, okay, but let me think of like the handful of great teachers too, who were only able to do what they could do because they had the security of a union contract and tenure. But so it's kind of remarkable if you look back 10 years ago, how teachers were being attacked all over the country. And now to see, like you can see polling during the course of the strike in Los Angeles, where public support went up during the course of the strike. And like the number of restaurants and food trucks giving away free food to teachers on strike went up during the course of the strike. And most of these strikes, right, it's not like striking, I worked with the ILWU here for a few years, and I know actually on the docks in Longshore, if you strike a ship, because they're paying so much money every hour to be in port, if you delay how long a ship is in port for a few hours, you cost them a lot of money. If you strike a school system, you're not costing them a lot of money right away. You win or lose based on having the public support. And these strikes, partly because they've been not just about money, but about taking responsibility for this fight over, do our kids have a right to the same quality of education that rich people want for their kids or not, have won public support. So that's the hopeful part of it, and that's what's at stake still going forward. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here.